Riyadh has warned Washington that it will sell off hundreds of billions of dollars worth of assets in the U.S. if Congress passes a bill which allows the Saudi government to be held responsible in connection with the 9/11 attacks. Saudi Arabia says it will be forced to sell up to $750 billion in treasury securities and other assets in the U.S. in order to prevent them from being frozen by American courts. U.S. government officials have reportedly lobbied with senators to block the bill's passage. They have warned Congress of diplomatic and economic fallout from the legislation. President Barack Obama is expected to visit Riyadh next week. It's not clear yet whether the issue will be discussed during the visit. Tony, it's good to have you with us. Now, you probably may have heard the last question, but let me remind you of the threat that is being posed by Saudi Arabia in and by itself can be seen by many, at least, according to some analysts, as some sort of a guilty verdict against them so far as the 9/11 attacks are concerned. What is your analysis there?
Well, look, the 28 pages that President Obama is trying to release, and it's a very important final year of his presidency, of his 2 terms of office as US president. He's doing everything I can, particularly, I think he can, particularly with the building relations with Cuba, etc., to hand over to the next president a better situation of foreign policy than he has got from George Bush. But the 28 pages he's now saying he wants to release of the 9/11 report, which were declassified, very much, it seems, point the finger at Saudi Arabia. The allegation is that these 28 pages jeopardize US national security. And actually, the reality is that the political storm, if Saudi Arabia is implicated here, that it could unleash, may even crash the dollar, because along the side with this new law is being contemplated in the United States, which would allow the suing of Saudi Arabia, because many people forget that 15 of the 19 hijackers on the September the 11th attacks were Saudi nationals, and this aspect was always very uncomfortable for the United States to go into because of the close ties and financial ties and utter dependency on Saudi oil. That's the main problem here, is that the Americans didn't ever want to find Saudi Arabians guilty. But on the other side, there are also big media failings in actually explaining to the American public and to Congress what really happened on September the 11th. And there are documents like this, which is called Beyond Misinformation by Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, which makes a watertight case by architects and by engineers. The buildings on September the 11th attacks were brought down by controlled demolition rather than by the aircraft. I mean, many people who looked at the buildings coming down thought, well, could an aircraft fire high up in a building which is nearly been put out by the firefighters actually bring a building down in that way? And architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth say no. So there's a whole lot of problems in the way that 9/11 has been dealt with in the United States. And effectively, I suppose what's happening now is the chickens are coming home to roost from all of the lies that have been told over the years and the failure. And I think, in a way, Obama, what he's trying to do here is to begin the process of coming to terms with some of the lies that were told over September the 11th attacks. And that's a really good thing. Whether he'll achieve it is a whole other question. But
Tony, speaking of
go.
whether or not Obama might be achieving to come to terms with the realities in the past, which might have been coming home to roost, do you get a sense that these Saudi warnings to the U.S. establishment in a way mean that the U.S. government as a whole and its foreign policy apparatus have been taken hostage this time around, not by the pro-Israel Zionist lobby as we know it, but this time around by the Saudis themselves?
Well, look, what's happening here is the Saudis are holding a sword of Damocles over the United States, saying, well, look, if you want to go there, then the $750 billion, we may have to literally withdraw our investment, which is helping prop up the US dollar and helping prop up the American economy. So what we're going to see, I think, over the next few weeks, I mean, particularly Wednesday next week, when Obama goes to Riyadh to meet King Salman, is we're going to see in the balance here, principles on the one hand and truth, and the mainstream media has got a lot to do to catch up with the real truth on September the 11th, attacks in the Western world versus money. And that's effectively what's going on over the next few weeks. I think we'll see the two. We're happy to decide which is going to win out here and which of the big decisions going to go with. Are we going to start to get the truth? Because if we are, it looks like there could be big problems the Saudis may cause to the US economy.
Now, very briefly, Tony, now, if the Saudis actually manage to get away with this, like many other instances of getting away with total impunity in the past, what kind of a message is this going to, unprecedented message that is going to, signal to Western capitals, including U.S. allies in the region, and how significant do you think that will be?
Well, it's difficult to know, but of course, what's happened, I think, ultimately is we're seeing in the Middle East playing out a much bigger game, if you could call it a game, because many people are dying. Maybe I shouldn't call it a game, but that's the way I think that many of the calculating people in the Pentagon see it, is a bigger game between China and Russia and the United States. So, what we've seen over the last couple of decades, is Afghanistan and Iraq turned into a mess, and also, of course, Libya and Syria absolutely devastated. And I noticed today, and this is not in the Russian media or the Iranian media, this is in the newspaper, national newspaper here in Britain, Patrick Coburn, literally talking about what he says is they've done it again. Talking about Yemen and the devastation that's been caused in Yemen. We're now in a situation, Oxfam say there 82% of the 21 million people in Yemen are starving. So I think effectively the policies it's becoming clear to the world that the policies of the relationships between the United States and Great Britain, to a lesser extent, in the Middle East are causing utter devastation, and that they're not going anywhere. So I think maybe we're hitting here, I hope anyway, we're hitting a bit of a foreign policy cul-de-sac, and that's going to be the end of the matter,
Western
because it's very difficult to
is.
justify what's happened in Yemen and all those other countries.
Okay, Tony Gosling, I want to thank you for your contribution there.